everyone, welcome back to The Layout, the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision in HO scale. My name is Darrell Cruz, owner and builder of The Layout, and your host for episode 7 of season 2024. Hard to believe that we're already up to the 7th update, 7 weeks into the new year, and 7 weeks of some pretty good progress. This last week did some serious work on scenery. I've been working on the Aspen Tunnels here for the last couple weeks. And I'm not quite finished yet, but it's definitely getting there. This is where we were last week at this time. At last week's update had all the plaster in, the basic mountain form built with cardboard webbing, and on top of that some rosin paper, and on top of that some plaster gauze, and on top of that some painted on plaster of Paris to smooth it all out. And this is kind of where we left things last week, and this steps that we did last week are definitely some of the messier steps. Working with the plaster and everything. But I was pretty happy with the way it all kind of went together, and was definitely looking forward to getting started on putting down some actual scenery. Now, before I start doing the scenery, though, I want to paint the track and the tunnel portals. And the initial color that I used was way darker than I wanted it to be. I got it from Home Depot, and the spray can cap did not turn out to be the same color as the actual paint. So I went to Hobby Lobby and got some spray paint. And in this case, the cap did match pretty well, and so definitely got a much better color for concrete, and definitely lighter. As you can see, with a lighter color, you can see the detail of the tunnel portals a lot better. And so I was definitely relieved to see it coming out to be a much better color than I originally did. Now, it looks a little shiny right now, but that's because it was still wet when I took this video. But now I was ready to move on to scenery. Definitely had a pretty big order at Lombard Hobbies. Actually had a lot of this already, but I did order a bunch more to make sure I had enough of everything. So I stocked up from Lombard Hobbies on the Woodland Scenics scenery material. It's basically ground foam. And now, before I did the actual putting down the scenery, I tried to get things ready. I covered up everything. Definitely a little bit better prepared this week than last week as far as getting the track below covered. And, of course, taped all the track that had been painted. And I did not tape off the tunnel portals. I just kind of used a wet paper towel so that if I got any of the paint on there, I was able to get it off. And now this is with all the painted plaster and the sprinkled on layers of ground foam. So I painted around the tunnel portals rock red, iron oxide red color. Mix that up. I mix it with the color tube, artist colors, and then I mix it with white glue and water, and then some N-scale ballast. Kind of give it some good texture, so it doesn't just look like painted on paint. And then I painted the rest of it the desert sand, Sonoran desert sand color. And then once that was on, then I sprinkled it with the ground foam. And I went with the finer ground foam first, and then I went layer after layer into thicker and thicker. So I went first with the yellow grass fine turf, together with the green blend fine turf on top of that. And then I added some more of the two different colors of, again, the yellow grass and the different shades of green for the coarse turf. So fine turf first, then on top of that, coarse turf, and on top of that, then some underbrush, and then on top of that, finally the clump foliage. So went from the finer to the more, the bigger pieces. And I probably put a little bit more on than I really wanted to. Now here you can see not only do I have it down, but I also have it wetted and the diluted glue applied. So I use just some water with a couple drops of detergent that I spray on there first just to get all the ground foam wet. So I get it fairly soaking wet. And then I follow that up with a mixture of I think it's 2/3 water and 1/3 glue. So 1 part water to 2 parts, 1 part glue to 2 parts water. Now that's a much more dilute glue than what you use on the ballast. For the ballast, it's usually 1-to-1. But the ballast glue, you just use a dropper to drop the glue on here. For the scenery, I use a spray bottle to apply the glue, the diluted glue. So it has to be much thinner, otherwise it won't spray through the sprayer. So for the glue to hold on the scenery materials, I use a 1 part glue to 2 parts water, as opposed to the 1-to-1 for the ballast. And it it's not as strong a glue as what you have for the ballast, but you really don't need, for scenery, you don't really need it to be that strong. The 1 part glue to 2 parts water is definitely enough to keep the scenery materials in place. So here you can see I have all the scenery material on and glued. And it's not quite dry 100%, but it was dry enough for me to remove the tape from the track and actually get some trains running through there, kind of see how it's going to look coming up. Was pretty happy with everything at this point and the way things were turning out. Now keep in mind as we go through this, I'm just doing basic scenery, so when I come back and do the detail scenery, there's going to be, one of the things is going to be weathering on the tunnel portals, as well as a lot of additional details added here and there. So right now, the first pass on the entire layout, I'm just trying to get things covered up, trying to get the wood covered up and a basic scenery down. So far it looks pretty good. As we see some auto racks going through. When I did the red color around the tunnel portal, it came out way darker than I wanted it to be. So I actually went back and repainted it again to kind of lighten it up. I may have been able to go even lighter still. But when I do the detailing, I should be able to go ahead and add some highlights and so forth to lighten it up even further. All right, now the next step was to getting the backdrop back behind the scenery. Now, if you remember from the previous video last week's, I glued the cardboard webbing to the backdrop there. So when I put the backdrop in there, I have to get that removed. And the hardboard is just held in place by 2 screws there. And then it's sitting on the frame. There you can see it sitting on the frame. And I wanted to get the backdrop behind there. So I used just a putty knife to kind of get the, just kind of went all the way around there and went back behind there. And that basically was to get the glue, the glue gun that I used, and separate the backdrop from the glue that I had used to attach it. Now I had put in some extra support so that the mountain wouldn't collapse. Now here you can see I took one of the screws out, which meant the hardboard was loose, and that way I was able to move it, and I had already used the putty knife to separate it, And then you can see I actually ended up removing this screw also. But it enabled me to have the hardboard back far enough to where I could get the backdrop back behind there. Now when I printed this backdrop out with the for where I had printed out at Walgreens, I didn't really worry about what was on the middle of the backdrop. I was just worried about the ends. So I kind of measured things out and kind of wanted to make sure that we had a backdrop that I wanted for the ends, because I knew in the middle all I needed was the sky. And I kind of measured things out to make sure that it was at the right height and would go to the end of the hardboard backdrop there. And basically this is a matter of going back and forth. I ended up having to use the drill, and actually if you notice in the left hand side that screw is still in place there, which is making it difficult on that side. But I basically kind of went back and forth and got the backdrop to go down all the way to the plywood. And here's where I'm going ahead and removing this screw so that I can move this side of the hardboard as well. That allowed me to go ahead and get that to go back behind there. Again, I kind of used the putty knife to kind of make sure that there was room for the backdrop to get back behind there. By the way, this is really a two-person job. I don't really recommend doing this by yourself. It definitely would go a lot better and a lot easier if I had somebody, you know, on each end. So this is just me working on this. So I just kind of went back and forth with my step stool or step ladder there. And then I went ahead and added in some more of the backdrop. That one on the end there, the very first one on the very right, I ended up taking that one out and replacing it. It was too red. One thing I noticed, the color of different things depends a lot on the sun and what time of day it's taken and just how the reflections go. And sometimes it's just the topography is just different. Like this one that you're looking at right now, it's just one picture and you can see a transition from green to red very easily. But here I have them kind of setting somewhat in place. You notice I'm using some trees to camouflage the change from one backdrop to another. Again, these are printed at Walgreens. I used some actual pictures that I took out at the Evanston sub and used Walgreens to photo editing software to put together a photo, and then printed them out at Walgreens, which is very inexpensive. Now here's kind of put my camera up and took pictures after each step, and you can kind of see what a difference a backdrop makes. Here we're going back now. There's the fascia not being painted. So here's what it was to begin with, and then the backdrop, the first backdrop helped a lot, and then the extended backdrops help even more, and then painting the fascia definitely kind of pulls it all together. So definitely having a backdrop and having the fascia painted definitely makes a difference. Notice the trees that I put in there, the way the track it goes through here, this is probably where the track is the closest to the backdrop. So I really smushed the trees down. Now when you look at it at a angle here, it looks a little odd, but definitely needed to get some clearance there. The one thing I wanted to do is make sure that I had almost too much foliage, if you remember, so I wanted to also put in the maintenance roads. So I removed a lot of the foliage there between the tracks, and then put some ballast, some buff ballast, and mixed in a little bit of brown ballast there for the maintenance road. I may add a little bit more brown yet. And put that in here too. Definitely makes it look more realistic. Now, of course, the last thing one more thing I need to do is ballast the track. So that will definitely be the kind of a finishing touch. And here you can see I replaced that third backdrop to blend in a little bit better. Again, here you can see that's one picture right there, going from the green to the red in the background. And again, I added trees here and there on the seams, and there's a couple of places where they're kind of a mirror image. So I put a tree there. I have one little seam there up to the left there. I need to put another tree in there somehow, cover that up. But this is kind of how it looks right now. Definitely looks a lot better than it did last week, doesn't it? Once I get this upper level done, then I'm going to attack the lower level below it, the Morgan area. I also this week put in a couple of turnout motors for the excursion train and maintenance way train sidings that I had added last couple weeks. These are tortoises, but they're smale, and they actually turned out to be bigger than I thought. These are smaller than their regular tortoises, and I thought I would have room, but they actually were bigger than I thought. And you notice here I actually had to bump out the little hardboard there to give clearance for this turnout motor. Again, they're called Smale by Circuitron, which also make tortoises. One reason why I picked out this Smale, I know I could have done some servo motors and so forth, but one thing I liked about this Smale is that they have a decoder built in to it. And here you can see some of the wiring and how I bumped it out a little bit. But anyway, I just went ahead and attached the power to the rails, and then use switch commands. Here you can see how I soldered to the rails and then to the board here. So these not only include the turnout motors, but also a decoder. So it made it a lot easier for me to not only get these installed, but then have them connected up. Here you can see the ran power from the rails to one of them, and then ran a wire to the other one. Then I got them put into the dispatcher's panel. So here you have the Green River side of the staging yard. That's where the excursion and maintenance way tracks are. So it kind of fits in with all the rest of the staging yard track. So real happy with the way that turned out. Here's what the entire dispatcher's panel looks like. This is not the actual dispatcher's panel. This is just what I use when I'm running trains by myself. It's kind of an automatic signaling. Dispatcher's panel looks similar, but a little bit different. So that's where we are as of today, February 25th. And this next week I'm going to be ballasting track. Definitely want to get that done. And then I'll probably be in pretty good shape to start working on the lower level there in the Morgan area. So I'm kind of doing this upper level, and then I'm going to do then the lower level, and just kind of moving my way across the remainder of the layout. Want to get all the wood covered up, and then I'll have time to do more detailed work on the scenery, but definitely I think once I get all the wood covered up, then I'm going to focus on doing some weathering. Really like the way the maintenance roads make it look more like a right-of-way for the railroad and not just simply some tracks out in the wilderness. We have a coal train going westward towards Evanston, and then the manifest train is an eastward train heading towards Granger and Westvaco, Peru, and then eventually Green River. Really like the way the backdrop blends in. One thing I am going to do yet also this week is I selected the printing to be on a satin finish, and they gave me glossy, which I really don't mind because it's a little bit thicker paper. So it's like, and it's more expensive too, and so they charged me for the satin but gave me the glossy. So it's a little bit thicker paper. But the glossy finish does produce the reflections. If you look at the upper portion of the backdrop, you can see the reflections of the lights. So I need to flatten it out a little bit more, add a few more staples, and then I'm going to spray it with some matte clear spray, and that'll get rid of hopefully all of the reflections there. So it just looks like a solid blue. I do use a staple gun mainly to attach these to the wall, and it probably would be better to use a spray adhesive of some sort, and had definitely thought about doing that. But the reason why I didn't want to use a spray adhesive and just glue it to the wall, to the drywall, is I was afraid that at some point in time when I'm gone and this layout is being removed from the basement in preparation for being sold, that when they take the backdrop material off the wall, that it won't tear the drywall paper off of the drywall. So it'll be a lot easier to patch up some holes from a staple gun than it would be to try to replace the paper being removed from the drywall. So, and I just staple it at the very top and at the bottom. The bottom staples are hidden by ground cover. The top ones are at the very edge, and so really aren't noticeable. So, thanks so much for watching, everyone. This brings us to the end of another week. Really appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe and comment and like this video. Really appreciate everybody watching and participating. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.